Hi, and welcome to LE 200. This presentation is going to go over chapters 3 and 4 in your text. Both these chapters are talking about two of the main sources of law, statutory law and then case law or judicial opinions. Okay, so statutes first. When we think of the law, you really think that most people I think of these days are the statutes, the laws that the legislative branch passes. So what are statutes? We've looked at and talked a little bit about how a bill becomes a law. So a bill is that proposed law that someone in Congress introduces. And it can be introduced in the House, it can be introduced in the Senate. Most are introduced in the House. And we've talked about who makes up the House and who makes up the Senate. And make sure you're relating and remembering that back to that concept of federalism and why we have a bicameral legislature split between the House of Representatives and the Senate, and how those representatives are chosen and how they differ. The House of Representatives is based on population, and the Senate, every state has 2 senators to represent them. So that's that compromise between those strong state rights proponents and those that are proponents of a strong national government. That was kind of our compromise. So in order for a bill to become a law, it has to make it through both houses of Congress. So if it starts out in the House, then it goes through, and once there's a final approved bill from the House side, then it has to go through the Senate the same way and make it out before it even gets to the executive branch. The president has the option to sign it, to veto it, to pocket veto it, and then it would become a law. So once it's actually enacted and becomes a law, then it is codified, and meaning that it is put into a set of books that are basically easier to access. It's also printed just in sequential order. The slip law becomes part of the just how it was passed, what order, when, what date, which that's not very accessible, so then it becomes part of the code and organized by subject area. So those statutes, which it sounds like a fairly complicated process, and it is, but the legislature still puts out quite a few. So we have a lot of laws, a lot of statutes on the books. Then on the state side, you have a similar process, and you have state codes as well as the federal code. And you can think back to our discussion about the U.S. Constitution and that division of powers between the states and the federal government, remembering the 10th Amendment that any powers not vested in the United States government are reserved to the states respectively. So a lot of the laws that you look at on a daily basis are state laws unless you have a federal practice, which, if you remember back to our discussion of jurisdiction, you either have to have a federal question to be able to get into federal court or diversity jurisdiction. So the vast amount of cases are really litigated in the state courts, and you're looking at the state statutes. So we'll focus more on the West Virginia Code. Okay, so the legislative branch creates the statutes, and we kind of went through that process of how. Can statutes be changed? So you've heard of those concepts of separation of powers and checks and balances in American government courses over the years, and in your reading in the legal classes. This basically means that those 3 branches of government are there to keep a check on one another and keep a balance, so we don't end up with that big great king overruling everything and not being in contact with the people. The Congress, the legislative branch, is supposed to be that branch which is most connected to its citizens. Those that serve as members of the House of Representatives or members of the Senate are supposed to be representative of the population as a whole. So, election day, you go and you vote for who you want to represent you. And if you have questions or issues or problems, then those are the people that you contact to discuss those. And ideally, their offices would be very receptive and work with you. If not, then you might consider advocating and voting elsewhere in the next election and helping in the campaigns to get someone that is responsive, because that's their number one job, is to be representative. Okay, so those checks and balances, or that separation of powers, we have the legislative branch that passes the statutes, and then we have the executive branch and the judicial branch. So on our example of how a bill becomes a law, one obvious check or balance on the legislative branch is the right of the executive branch to veto a law. And if the president decides to veto a law, then it can go back to Congress and that can be overruled as well. So another kind of back and forth check and balance. Now, once it becomes a law, the judicial branch also has that power to listen, interpret, and potentially overrule the law and find it unconstitutional if it deems it so. So whenever all the actions of a government that our government takes can be checked by another branch and potentially changed. Types of statutes that you read, there are private laws and public laws. Most of the ones that we're dealing with are public laws. Those private laws are the ones that are dealing with like a specific individual. The easiest example is really that immigration status. If someone is granted a visa to stay here, then that would be a private law issued, but it would affect only that person. Okay, finding statutes. We have all of the federal statutes are codified in the United States Code, the official reporter. And then the United States Code can also be found in unofficial reporters. The most frequently cited ones are those offered by Westlaw and Lexis. I have other listed here, just thinking of other legal research software that exists. If you notice at the front of your textbooks, these ones from Aspen, they give you access to something called Lois Law, which is mentioned before. I think if you consider Westlaw and Lexis to kind of be the Lexus of a vehicle, of a legal research software, your Lois Law, Fastcase, those ones are more like on the Kia level. So they still can do the job, but maybe not quite as slick as the others. Browsing the U.S. Code on Westlaw, I'm going to flip over here so you can see my Westlaw screen. Which I'm going to sign off to make sure that everyone is clear on how to sign in. Let's see if it gives me back. Okay. So the first time, hopefully everybody is on Westlaw. If you're not, then send me a message and we'll work to get you on there. The first time that you sign on to Westlaw, you need to click up here to switch to Westlaw password sign on. And you'll have a 16-digit combination of numbers and letters that you enter here. And then under Client ID, you can just enter your last name. And the purpose of this Client ID section is that if you were working in a law firm and conducting research on behalf of a client, then you would enter that client's name here so that when they do their reports at the end of the however often they bill, they would see that you spent X hours working on the Smith case or such and such. So you just have to enter something there. And once you first sign on, it's going to give you a welcome screen where you can enter and create your own OnePass username, which basically is just whatever you want it to be. In my case, it is my email address. I'm going to enter my last name there and sign on. Okay. Now the first screen you come to is an important one, and everyone probably just scrolls down to the bottom quickly and clicks agree, which is fine after you've read this once. Make sure that you understand that by clicking here you are virtually agreeing that the only purpose you're using Westlaw for is academic, so dealing with school. If you go and you get a job at a law office, you can't use your Westlaw subscription there to do research for that firm. This is only for academic purposes. For personal use, if you want to look at something that you're interested in, it's a good way to learn and to move around, but it can't be anything that's for profit. So click I agree. And here we are at the Westlaw screen. Now, one of the easiest ways I find to navigate, if you click directory, and you can customize this to make it look how you want it to look, and then you click all databases over here on the left. This gives you an overview of everything that you have access to in Westlaw. Now when you go and you work for a law firm or somewhere, most likely this will be less. Westlaw determines the price of your subscription based upon what you want access to. And you don't necessarily need access to all of this over here, but usually what you do need is your state and then U.S. federal materials. So we were going to look at browsing the U.S. Code. If you click on U.S. federal materials, these are all the folders of all the materials dealing with federal law. Now we want to look at the United States Code, so we're going to click on Federal Statutes. And then you see here you've got the Internal Revenue Code, the United States Code, the Constitution, legislative histories, all kinds of stuff. What we're looking for here is the United States Code Annotated, USCA. And if you click on that, it'll open up a search screen. So you can just search here if you want. And terms and connectors are using these connectors and expanders down here. So if you want to search for something like, I don't know, gun regulations, and federal buildings. You can enter that. Now when you enter that, it's going to search every document to try to find any document that has any of these words in them. It's not going to limit it in any way. It's just going to pull up any and every section of the code that has these documents, these words. Down here, you can use, so I use the and one, so it's going to make sure that it has these words and these words. If you just do a space, so you can do the ampersand, or you can type out and, you can do a space for or. If you want to make sure that you're searching for the phrase, so in this case, federal buildings, you would put a quote at the beginning and the end. So now it's going to find documents that have federal buildings, not just federal, not just buildings, in any form. They're just going to put them together. You can use the percent sign, so if you want to see, maybe you're searching and you want to know about gun regulations, but you don't want to deal with anything with federal buildings, so then you could use the percent sign to eliminate that. This next one, the root expander, the exclamation point. So if you want to search for federal building or buildings, you can put an exclamation point at the end, and it's going to find anything that has building or buildings with the S. You could make it a little bit broader and do adhere, and it'll find anything with the root build. So it would find build, builds, building, buildings, etc., builded, etc. Then these ones, if you want to put them in the same sentence or proceeding within the same sentence or within the same paragraph, you can type P within the same paragraph as something to do with a shooting or something like that. Then you can do that. Okay, so terms and connectors, you're using these. You can switch to natural language, and we're going to get more into using the internet, Westlaw searching later in the course as well, but I want you to be familiar with it and be able to start playing with it and looking at it. Natural language is just what you just type what you want to know. So what regulations exist regarding guns in federal buildings, or something like that. Now this is going to give you a much broader search, you're going to get a lot more results than you are with the terms and connectors, because this lets you refine it, which you can do either to start. And it gives you a little thesaurus too, so you can pull out those other words that the court might have used that you might not be using. If you look up here on the right, you can click on Find by Citation. So if you have that citation, 41 U.S.C.A. 29 or whatever it is, assuming my internet picks up here, you could just enter the citation there and it'll pull up that code section for you. You have to forgive my slow internet. We'll see if you can actually see that. Table of contents. This is just going to pull up the table of contents and give you the list of all the, remember how when it's codified, it's separated into different titles or code sections, and so that'll list all the different titles, what their topics are. So when you have the questions, which title references XYZ, whatever it was, you could just scroll through and browse and be like, oh, there's the title that dealt with it. All right. I think I'm going to try to refresh here and see if I can get my internet to come back up. It may or may not. Statutes index is just like an index with anything else. If you click on it, it'll give you A, B, C, D all the way through that you can click on, or you can actually enter search terms and go and look. Here we go. Maybe. All right. So we were going to try to look at Find by Citation, see if that comes up. Popular name table, if you have, so yes, here's the Find by Citation. It gives you you could just basically fill in the box to determine which one you're looking at. You can look at public laws, rules, the Constitution, or orders as well, and it'll give you the boxes there. So let's see if while it's working here, I'll switch over to the table of contents, and this is where you can see, just like you were looking at the table of contents of any book or encyclopedia or something, it'll give you a list of everything that's in there. If you see a little plus sign on the left hand side, that means you can click it and expand it. I unfortunately have cellular internet that is sometimes questionable. So then there was also, it said POP name table, popular name table, I think. You can click on that, so if you want to go look at the some act that the federal government has passed. So you might see the Taft-Hartley Act, or the whatever you would hear, like the new Healthcare Act or something. You can click on that and search through and look as well. Okay, so we'll go back to the PowerPoint since that is not working that well anyway. All right, so okay, so you can browse the code on Westlaw by looking through the table of contents, by looking through the popular name table, by looking through the index, however you want to browse it. You can do the same thing for the West Virginia code. We'll try to do that here in a few minutes, and so you can see how to get onto it. Pocket parts. If you are using book resources in the library, then at the back of every book is a pocket part, or a slip saying that there is no pocket part. If you look at page 86, it gives you an example in your text of what that looks like. And you always have to make sure to check that. And what that is when the legislature meets or something and passes new laws and they don't have a new book printed yet, they issue what are called pocket parts. So little paper kind of newsprint type versions of it that they send to anybody with a subscription to keep their books updated, and then they stick that in the back. So when you find your code section in the front, then you need to check the pocket part in the back to make sure your code section isn't listed there, because something may have changed. And they'll put anything like an additional annotation or something like that in there as well. And then key citing, if you are using Westlaw, using the internet, if you look up in the top left-hand corner off to the side from where the statute name or the case name is, then you will see either a green C, a blue H, a yellow flag, or a red flag, and those are your symbols for whether or not the law is still good. You can kind of think of them as stoplights. If it's blue or green, then you can pretty much just keep going, but you can still click on it and it'll give you its citation history, which is cool. So maybe we'll try to look at that in a minute. Okay, but that's to make sure that your law is still good. If you see a yellow flag or a red flag, then you need to check to make sure the point of law that you're citing is still valid. Research techniques. The descriptive word approach is kind of what I was showing a little bit earlier. If you just want to enter words that are applicable to your situation and search for them, you can do that. Or the title topic, if you want to go through and kind of look through the table of contents and browse, hey, this looks like the right section that I'm looking at, and start there. Or if you know what act you're dealing with, then you could use the popular name approach. Okay, so browsing the West Virginia code, let's see if I have any luck getting back on Westlaw. I may or may not. Internet has been spotty today, but you can basically do the same thing that I showed to get to the United States Code. So if you click at the directory at the top, all databases, state materials, and then you open that up, West Virginia will probably be listed at the top. Click that, and then you can go to statutes. So I'm not having luck right there looking, but once you go to statutes, the same options are there: the index, the popular name index, and the table of contents as well. Okay, Chapter 4 is talking about case law or judicial opinions. They're basically interchangeable names there. Selective publication, a review of primary and secondary authority. If you remember, primary authority is that is which binding on the court, and secondary can be used for persuasive only, and that can vary some depending on the jurisdiction you're in. So as we talked about before, if you have a case in West Virginia Circuit Court and there is a case on point issued by the West Virginia Supreme Court of Appeals, and you would cite to it, and that would be binding precedent on the court that you're reviewing. Now, it doesn't mean that a case can never be overruled or changed. It can, it has, but it doesn't happen very often. The policy of stare decisis is to follow the previous precedent set. So if you are in West Virginia Circuit Court and you have a West Virginia Supreme Court case that is on point, then the court is obligated to follow that. But if you have a case from, say, a neighboring state like Ohio on a similar issue from one of their courts, you could present it to the court as persuasive authority, but it wouldn't be binding there, whereas it would be binding in Ohio, depending on where you are. Standards for publishing cases. Most lower courts, trial courts, are not published. Those opinions are not published, so there's selective publication on the federal level, and then state courts like West Virginia, the only reported published decisions you're going to find are the West Virginia Supreme Court of Appeals. But if there is a trial court order or something that you want to see, if you know the name of it and what court you're in, then you can go to the clerk's office and see a copy of that as well. So long as it's not sealed, it is public record. Okay, the elements of a case. The case name, and the case citation in general can tell you a lot of information. Smith v. Jones is just your typical adversarial matter where Smith is suing Jones. In re Smith, stands for regarding a matter, so you might be having a court that is looking at a bankruptcy or looking at the disbarment of a lawyer, so it might say in re Smith, so maybe Smith has been disbarred and that's the case that's talking about it, so you don't have an adversarial party on the other side. State v. Smith, that's usually a criminal proceeding, so state is representing, or you'll see U.S. v. Smith if it's a federal, the government representing society as a whole to prosecute a crime. Ex rel. Smith, upon relation or information of, so something might do with that, or ex parte Smith, it's only dealing with one side of it, you don't have somebody from the other side responding. Alright, you also see a docket number in deciding court. Deciding court is a court that is issuing the opinion, which is obviously going to be relevant for determining what level of authority to attribute to it. The docket number is the internal organization, the number assigned by that court. So if you were looking at like the West Virginia Supreme Court of Appeals, and you want to see their decisions before they're out and published in the book, or just as they're issued, they're going to have a docket number, and you can search by docket number. And we'll see if we can take a look at that here in a few minutes. Then the date of the decision, so you have the date that the court decided the case. A case synopsis or summary telling you kind of a brief this case is about. The head notes are something that are produced by the publishers, not the courts themselves, that are going to give you summaries of the points of law, the issues that are discussed in the case to kind of help you determine whether or not that's relevant. The names of counsel, the lawyers, the opinion itself, what the court's ultimate opinion is and what their decision is, whether or not when you're usually looking at an appellate decision when you're looking at a published case, so whether they are affirming, remanding, or reversing a case. There's a map, a chart on page 127 that shows you how the different cases are reported and which reporter your cases are going to appear in, like the West Virginia Supreme Court of Appeals decisions are published in the West Virginia Reporter, which there's a copy of in the Mountain State Library, and also published in the Southeast Second Reporter. So parallel citations, kind of leads right into that, are when you have a citation to a case in multiple publications, but it goes to the same case and it's the same wording and everything, but you might have your West Virginia decision published in a West Virginia Reporter, and then you might also have it in the Southeast Second Reporter. So if you maybe you're in a neighboring state that is in the same circuit and likes to keep up with the neighboring states, then they might not have the West Virginia Reporter, but they might have the Southeast Second Reporter, so they could still pull that up. Again, not as relevant as we move into the internet age, because you can just pull up whatever online. But when you're dealing with multiple books, it can be very useful, and you definitely need to make sure to include those as needed. And part of your assignment this week is to read Rule 12 in the ALWD manual, which does deal with the citation of cases. Okay. Figure 4.8 in your text on page 147 has some case reading strategies. If you, most likely you have read a case or two by now, and you can see they're not really exceptionally reader friendly. So a good process is to make sure that you have those techniques in mind when you're reading, so you get the important parts, and case briefing is definitely a useful skill as well. Frequently, students in law school will do it so that they have that case on hand in case they're called upon to describe it. They can have a quick reference, or if you have maybe your paralegal or associate lawyer doing research for you to check to see whether or not what cases are relevant, then you might have them prepare briefs, and you can kind of get a quicker glance to see, hey, these cases are probably worth looking at. These ones don't seem to be on point. Or if you're going to court for a hearing or something and you want to have a quick summation of your the cases that are being referenced, then it might help as a tool to refresh your memory when you're trying to remember the details. So everyone should have briefed a case by now. When you're doing that, you include the name of the case at the top, obviously, any and all citations, the procedural history, which goes over how the case got to that court, so where it was originally filed and how the appellate process worked to get it where it is. A statement of facts, just kind of who is who are these people, what happened to them, quick look at that. The issue or issues, if there are multiple questions that the court is being presented with, you can look, the U.S. Supreme Court requires that questions presented be written out, similar to like the issue. What are you asking the court to decide? And then you're going to have the answer or the holding, what those decisions are, the reasoning for that, and what the ultimate decision of the case was, if it was affirming, reversing, or remanding. Okay. So let's see. Okay, I've got Westlaw up here now. This gives you the table of contents. So you got all your titles here. I think there was a question regarding Title 51 there, and you have Federal Rules of Appellate Procedure there as well. So popular name table. If you are looking at, if you're trying to find a specific act, you can look there. Apparently this is pretty spotty today, but okay, so we've got all databases there again, and you can customize this. I haven't customized mine recently since I came back, but you can do that to list just what you use most frequently right there. And you can go through and browse the code. We'll see if that comes back in a minute. Okay, so here's the Sakai site. Okay, I don't think the internet's going to work as well. Alright, there it is. Legal Research and Writing Week 4 assignment is up. Your quiz for this week, Legal Research and Writing Week 4 quiz is up. And then forums, I included this week, generating search terms. This forum has to do with that law library exercise that I had uploaded as well for you to begin looking at, and this will be part of your midterm project ultimately. So this is kind of a brainstorming, working together session on those. I had some other sites up here at the Supreme Court of the United States you can see, so you can search for the docket. You can look to see what briefs have been filed with the Supreme Court. You can also look for the opinions, and I think you can listen to some of those arguments. This is just the Congress's site, so you can search current legislation here if you have like a public law number, and you'll notice HR 1091, so House of Representatives, and this was the 1091th law bill entered into the House during that term. So you can look at that. West Virginia Judiciary, the opinions are here, and it lists the docket. If you look, you can look at the current term opinions, and you can look at the past terms as well. So here is the case number, the docket number, and what the case is. So you can go and take a look at those if you'd like. And then the U.S. House, you can look for their schedule and what bills they're discussing, and same on the Senate. So it looks like Westlaw is the one that's really not working for me right now. Alright, so if you click on State Materials, West Virginia, and then Statutes and Legislative Materials, West Virginia Statutes annotated, and it brings you up that same kind of box. So you could search for your terms here. Table of contents. If you click when you see a plus, it'll expand it, and there's the table of contents and how everything is organized. So eventually you might know that, hey, I have a question regarding wills, I need to go look in chapter 41, so it might make more sense when you're doing something specific like that. You could go and browse that section. Popular name table, the issue that I have in the research assignment deals with grandparents and visitation, and after you look a little bit, you will see that there is a Grandparent Visitation Act. If you click on grandparents and grandchildren, so when you search, we're dealing with not crimes and offenses, intestate successions, dealing with when someone dies and they don't have a will, motions with visitation. Yeah, we're looking at visitation. So if you bring up, it'll pop up the window here, and this is the Grandparent Visitation Act. and part of it, so you can maximize that. And it'll give you the full statute there. And up here you can flip through it like a book. If you click next section, it's going to take you just to section 402, so the next section throughout. Okay, so if anybody has any questions or anything, send me a message. Thanks.